Good evening. The area around Gratiot and 7 Mile on Detroit's east side has been invaded by a horde of suburban dope fiends, hundreds of them, a veritable drug burbia, a greater metropolitan area, if you will. And if City Hall doesn't start paying some attention around there soon, Detroit very well may become the next San Francisco. The homeless ratio is roughly the same in Frisco as it is in Detroit. But here, you don't see the junkies flopped out on the streets. In Motown, they've taken up residence in the abandoned houses, most of which are owned by the incompetent and absentee Detroit Land Bank Authority. San Francisco, population 810,000 and falling, counted 7,700 homeless people last year. Detroit, population 630,000 and falling, claims 5,600 homeless. Surely Detroit's number is an undercount since the data is over 2 years old and collected at the height of the pandemic. HUD requires any community that receives federal funding for homelessness to conduct a head count on a single night once every 2 years, and it's usually on the coldest night. This includes people in shelters or sleeping outdoors, in cars, in pallets, or other places not considered permanent housing. This would include those living in condemned houses, I would presume, but I've never seen a homeless head counter knocking on those doors in the dead of a frosty night. Consider Liberal Street, which ought to be renamed Laissez-faire Boulevard since the city seems to completely ignore it. The houses are burned up, trash is everywhere, and the junkies have taken them over, and also the abandoned RVs in the alleyways. Remind yourself, regular people live here. School kids live here. The dope houses aren't hard to find. Just follow the white women with bruises on their legs or the men picking imaginary insects from their faces. One tweaker scolded me to get off his land, that he was fixing the place up for his father. I checked. The property belongs to the land bank. The legitimate longtime neighbors complain to the city. They get nothing. Their city councilman, Scott Benson, is no help. Most people around there don't even know who Scott Benson is. Those who do remember Scott Benson remember him as the guy who was raided by the FBI. And whatever happened to that, they wonder. Richard Wilson, a retired auto worker, lives on Verona Street next to an overgrown house of horrors owned by the land bank. He was forced to take a pot shot at a junkie with his 12-gauge shotgun because the junkie was trying to break into his garage. Across the street from Mr. Wilson is another dope house owned by the land bank. You know this dope house since the house is across the street from the Pulaski Elementary School. The city was shamed into boarding it up. Why the city still won't tear it down is beyond me. The ceiling has long since caved in and the walls are infected with black mold. Nobody's lived in it for a decade. In any event, land bank workers forgot to board up the detached garage, which quickly became an impromptu clubhouse for the now homeless addicts who once lived in the house. Nobody bothered to sweep the sidewalk, and so hypodermic needles still litter the driveway like so many autumn leaves. A father of one of the school kids took it upon himself to board up the garage last week. He's considered something of a hero around there now. People are talking about electing him to city council. Drug zombies, of course, are human beings. They're somebody's children. But they don't live at home anymore because their habits and behaviors have become so grotesque they had to be put out by their loved ones. And now they've taken up residence in someone else's vicinity and make perfect strangers' lives a living hell. How bad is it? There was a crack house on Saratoga Street where 7 people were shot last summer. 2 died on the lawn. Amazingly, the place was open for business 2 weeks later until again, we shamed the city. When the cops came, the addicts simply moved across the street into a land bank owned house. This shit doesn't even happen in Frisco. You know what I hear a lot? Charlie LeDuff newsman, I thought you were dead. I'm not dead. I'm doing the news. The real news, right here, the No BS News Hour. You can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Facebook, Odyssey, or download it wherever you get your podcasts. Power the people.